There are bad jobs. There are miserable jobs. And then there are those jobs that slowly suck every ounce of joy out of your body until even hearing your alarm clock feels like psychological warfare. For me, that job was the overnight shift at a giant American grocery store chain. Technically, I was hired as a night stalker. In reality, I was basically paid minimum wage to become part of a sleep-deprived cult fueled by fluorescent lighting, stale break-room coffee, and resentment. The store sat in a rundown suburban shopping center just outside the city. During the daytime, it looked normal enough. Families buying groceries, seniors arguing over coupons, kids begging for candy at checkout lanes. But overnight, the place transformed completely. The bright store lights reflected off empty aisles like some weird liminal space nightmare. The constant hum of refrigeration units echoed through the building. Pallets of inventory blocked entire walkways, while exhausted employees dragged themselves around restocking shelves like retail zombies. And the people, God, I've never worked anywhere more toxic. From the first night, it was obvious I wasn't welcome. Everybody already had their little groups formed. Smokers hung with smokers. Older employees stuck together complaining about management. Younger workers flirted with each other or disappeared into the back room to scroll TikTok during breaks. Meanwhile, I existed in this weird, invisible middle ground where nobody outright bullied me, but nobody acknowledged me either. No conversations, no invitations to lunch breaks, no jokes, nothing. It felt like transferring into a high school halfway through senior year, and management absolutely encouraged it. The overnight manager, Rick, was one of those guys who peaked emotionally at age 19 and spent the rest of adulthood trying to relive being the tough guy. He wore his store keys clipped loudly to his belt like a sheriff in an old Western movie and constantly reminded everyone how replaceable we were. Rick had one rule he enforced harder than anything else. You had to arrive 30 minutes before your scheduled shift, unpaid, and you had to stay at least 30 minutes after clocking out, also unpaid. Apparently, this had become store culture long before I got hired. Everybody just accepted it because they were terrified of losing hours or being treated worse. When I questioned it in my first week, the entire break room went silent. Not even exaggerating. I remember sitting there holding a microwaved burrito while people literally stared at me like I'd committed a crime. Rick smiled that fake management smile and said, "That's just how we do things here." I replied, "So, wage theft?" Nobody laughed. One older employee actually shook his head slightly like I was making a huge mistake. From that moment forward, I became the problem employee. Every terrible assignment somehow found its way to me. Cleaning exploded yogurt from refrigerated shelves, organizing the damaged product section, taking inventory in the freezing stockroom, breaking down mountains of cardboard alone while everyone else worked in teams. If there was a miserable task nobody wanted, suddenly it became my responsibility. And honestly, I probably could have survived that part. What really wore me down was the atmosphere. Everybody there was unhappy. Not regular unhappy, deeply, spiritually exhausted unhappy, the kind of unhappiness that settles into people after years of feeling trapped. You could see it in the way employees walked slowly through the aisles at 3 a.m. You could hear it in conversations during smoke breaks where everybody complained about bills, failed marriages, terrible bosses, or chronic back pain. Nobody smiled naturally. Nobody had energy. The store felt emotionally dead. Then one night, somebody brought in a Bluetooth speaker, and weirdly enough, everything changed a little. It started small. One guy in dairy played classic rock quietly while stocking milk. Another employee connected their phone later and blasted early 2000s rap during cleanup. Soon it became unofficial overnight tradition. Once the store closed to customers around midnight, the music started. And honestly, it helped. Not dramatically, nobody suddenly loved their job, but the silence disappeared. The endless monotony of stocking shelves became slightly more tolerable with music echoing through the empty aisles. People even started talking more, singing occasionally, laughing sometimes.
For the first time since I'd started there, overnight shifts almost felt human, and that somehow made everything worse for me. Because despite the music improving morale, nobody treated me differently. I was still excluded, still isolated, still the outsider. They'd all stand around laughing while I dragged pallets alone across the floor. Nobody invited me into conversations, nobody asked about my life. Even when I tried participating, responses stayed awkwardly short before the group drifted away again. It became painfully obvious that they weren't miserable because the job sucked. They were miserable people who'd simply grown comfortable in shared misery. And since I'd questioned management early on, I'd permanently earned my place outside the circle. Around that same time, though, my life was about to change completely. I got another job offer, a much better one. Daytime hours, better pay, actual benefits. When I received the call confirming I'd been hired, I nearly celebrated in the middle of aisle 7 next to canned soup. The new job started the following week, and immediately I decided something important. I wasn't giving notice. Not after the unpaid labor, not after the isolation, not after months of being treated like garbage. I planned on simply disappearing, work my final shifts, collect my paycheck, then vanish forever like a retail ghost. But during my last week there, as I watched everybody singing along happily while still pretending I barely existed, a petty little idea started growing in my head. If they wanted misery so badly, maybe I should give it back.
Once the idea got into my head, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every shift after that, I'd stand there stacking cereal boxes or dragging pallets through the aisles while music echoed through the store, and all I could think was, you people ignored me for months. Let's see how happy this place feels without your precious soundtrack. Now, to be clear, I wasn't trying to destroy anyone's life. I wasn't sabotaging products. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't reporting labor violations to corporate, although honestly I probably should have. No, I wanted something much simpler. I wanted morale crushed. Petty? Absolutely. But after months of being treated like an unwanted ghost by both management and coworkers, I'd stopped caring. And the beautiful part was that the plan barely required any effort at all. See, the grocery store backed up against a row of suburban houses. During the day, nobody noticed because traffic noise drowned everything out. But late at night, especially after midnight, the area got quiet enough that even small sounds carried surprisingly far. That's what gave me the idea. All I needed was a believable complaint. So I recruited my friend Tyler. Tyler was exactly the kind of person you want helping with petty revenge. Dramatic, committed, and willing to do stupid things purely for entertainment. The second I explained the situation over drinks one night, he nearly spit beer across the table laughing. You want me to pretend to be some angry neighbor? Yes. And complain about the music? Yes. That's it? That's it. He stared at me for a second before grinning. Oh, we are absolutely doing this. The next night at work, I paid close attention to everything. What songs played, how loud the speaker was, when management disappeared into the office, who controlled the playlist. I needed details to make the complaint believable. Around 12:45 a.m., somebody connected their phone and started blasting a mix of classic rock and early 2000s hip-hop through the Bluetooth speaker near produce. The overnight crew loved it. People were actually dancing while stocking shelves. One woman singing along terribly while organizing frozen pizzas somehow became the highlight of the shift. Even Rick seemed happier than usual, which made what happened next even funnier. At exactly 1:03 a.m., Tyler made the first call. I knew the moment it happened because the service desk phone rang and one of the supervisors answered with immediate confusion. A minute later, Rick came stomping out of the office already annoyed. "What's going on?" someone asked. Rick rubbed his forehead. "Noise complaint." The entire crew looked around confused. "Noise complaint?" somebody repeated. Rick pointed toward the speaker. "Apparently, somebody living across the street says they can hear the music inside their house." A few employees laughed. "No way. It's not even that loud." Rick shrugged. Guy sounded pissed. Then came the detail that sold everything. He said he could hear AC/DC from his bedroom window.
That part made everybody pause, because AC/DC actually had been playing moments earlier. I kept my head down, pretending to stock soup, while internally trying not to laugh myself unconscious. One employee rolled his eyes dramatically. People complain about everything. Still, Rick told them to lower the volume. The music dropped significantly after that. Not fully off, just quiet enough that now you could barely hear it over the humming refrigerators and rolling pallet jacks. And immediately the atmosphere changed. The energy dipped. Conversations slowed down. Nobody sang anymore. Perfect. But we weren't finished. About 20 minutes later, Tyler made the second call. This time, he escalated. Apparently, he told the supervisor that the bass was still shaking his walls, and that if the noise continued, he'd contact corporate and possibly the police. He even mentioned another artist name I'd texted him earlier just to prove the complaint sounded legitimate. That second detail absolutely destroyed them, because once again, the song he referenced had literally just played. Now management believed this furious imaginary neighbor was genuinely sitting awake cataloging songs in real time. Rick emerged from the office looking furious, not at the caller, at us. "All right," he snapped loudly, "that's enough. Turn the damn speaker off." The entire overnight crew froze. One guy actually protested. "Seriously?" "Yes, seriously. It's barely audible now." "I don't care," Rick barked. "If corporate gets involved, I'm not dealing with it." And just like that, silence. The speaker clicked off. The store instantly returned to what it had been before. Cold, awkward, miserable. The only sounds left were squeaking cartwheels, humming coolers, tearing cardboard, and exhausted employees sighing every few minutes. It was incredible. Within half an hour, morale completely collapsed. People stopped talking almost entirely. The same employees who'd been laughing and singing earlier now dragged themselves through aisles in dead silence like prisoners doing manual labor. One woman muttered, "This shift just got 10 times longer." Another employee blamed uptight homeowners. Someone else complained that people should mind their business. Meanwhile, I quietly stocked shelves, feeling inner peace for the first time in months. And the best part? Nobody suspected me. Not even slightly. Why would they? I barely talked to anybody there. As far as they knew, I was just another miserable overnight worker suffering alongside them. Except, I wasn't suffering. I was thriving. Every awkward, silent minute felt therapeutic. Rick looked especially irritated because without music, employees worked slower and complained more. Twice, I caught him standing near the front registers rubbing his temples like he regretted every decision that led him to retail management. Good. By around 4 a.m., the shift felt emotionally drained. No jokes, no energy, no spirit, just fluorescent lights and resentment. Exactly how the place had felt when I first arrived months earlier. The music hadn't fixed the toxic environment after all. It had only distracted people from it temporarily. And now the distraction was gone. Toward the end of the shift, one of the employees finally said what everyone was thinking. "This place sucks." I almost laughed out loud, because for months, I'd basically been punished for recognizing that exact truth. Now everybody else was forced to sit in it too. Silence really does make people confront reality. As we clocked out that morning, exhausted workers shuffled toward the employee exit looking genuinely defeated. And standing there beside the time clock, I realized something beautiful. I only had one more shift left.
By the time my final shift rolled around, the overnight crew still hadn't recovered from the noise complaints. The Bluetooth speaker sat untouched on a shelf near the break room like a banned weapon. Nobody even tried turning it on anymore. Apparently, after I left the previous morning, Rick had doubled down and warned everyone that if another complaint came in, corporate could launch an investigation, which was hilarious because corporate barely cared when employees got injured, let alone when suburban residents supposedly couldn't sleep because somebody played Journey at 2 a.m. But fear works wonders in toxic workplaces, especially when management feeds it. So now the overnight shift had fully reverted to its natural state, dead, silent misery. And honestly, the difference was shocking.
Without music covering the awkwardness, every unpleasant part of the job became louder somehow. The rattling wheels on broken pallet jacks, the endless scanner beeps, employees sighing dramatically every few minutes, the wet slapping sound of someone mopping near produce, even the fluorescent lights seemed louder. It felt less like a workplace and more like a depressing documentary about human exhaustion. I arrived 30 minutes early, like always, though this time I found the whole unpaid labor ritual almost funny. Because unlike everyone else there, I had an escape date. By tomorrow morning, I'd never walk through those automatic doors again. Meanwhile, these people would still be trapped there arguing about shelf tags and expired yogurt at 3 in the morning. That realization made enduring the final shift incredibly easy. Rick was already in a bad mood when I arrived. Apparently, productivity had dropped noticeably since the music ban, and upper management was asking questions about why overnight stocking numbers suddenly sucked. Imagine that. Turns out exhausted people work worse when you remove the one thing making the night tolerable. Who could have predicted it? As I grabbed my scanner and headed toward grocery aisles, I overheard employees complaining again. This place feels like a prison now. I swear these shifts take twice as long. Can't believe one stupid neighbor ruined everything. I kept my face neutral while internally enjoying every second. At one point, one of the younger workers actually suggested quietly bringing the speaker back. Rick shut that idea down immediately. Nope, not happening. What if we keep it super low? No. It's not fair, though. Rick snapped back instantly. You want to explain to corporate why residents are threatening police complaints? That sentence nearly made me lose composure. Residents, plural. One fake guy named Tyler had apparently evolved into an entire angry neighborhood in management's imagination. Amazing. The shift dragged on painfully for everyone else. Without music, employees started focusing more on each other's bad moods. Minor annoyances turned into arguments. One guy got irritated because another worker left cardboard near his pallet. Two women started bickering over misplaced inventory labels. Someone in frozen foods slammed a cart into a wall hard enough that Rick came storming over, ready to explode. Silence doesn't just remove fun, it amplifies tension. And this place already had enough tension to power a small city. Meanwhile, I spent most of the night secretly reflecting on how weird workplaces become when people stop pretending. That grocery store had never actually been fun. The music simply gave exhausted workers temporary emotional anesthesia. Take it away, and suddenly everybody remembered how miserable they were, including management. Around 2:30 a.m., I walked into the break room and found 3 employees sitting there silently staring at their phones under fluorescent lighting so harsh that it made everyone look medically unwell. One guy finally muttered, "This job is killing me." Nobody disagreed. That was the moment I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered the unpaid hours, the isolation, the months of being treated like I didn't exist, and suddenly my sympathy disappeared again. Toward the end of the shift, Rick gathered everyone near the front registers for a quick meeting. You know the type, the exhausted pre-dawn retail pep talk, where management pretends morale can be fixed with corporate buzzwords. "Look," he said, rubbing tired eyes, "I know things have been rough this week, but we need to stay focused and positive." Nobody responded. A woman stocking candy bars actually yawned mid-speech. Rick continued anyway. "We can still have a good work environment without distractions." That line was so absurd I had to physically look away to hide my expression. This man had spent months enabling unpaid labor while treating employees like replaceable machinery, and now he wanted to talk about good work environments. Retail management really does exist in its own reality sometimes. Then came my favorite moment of the entire night. One employee asked quietly, "So the speaker's permanently banned now?" Rick sighed heavily. "Yeah." The collective disappointment in the room felt almost cinematic. and sitting there among them, knowing I caused the entire thing with 2 fake phone calls and a friend named Tyler, was one of the funniest experiences of my life. At exactly 6 a.m., the shift ended. Employees shuffled toward the time clock looking exhausted and emotionally drained. Outside, early morning sunlight started creeping across the parking lot while customers slowly arrived for another day of shopping. Normal people beginning their mornings while we ended ours. I clocked out, grabbed my backpack, and headed toward the exit without saying goodbye to anyone. Nobody stopped me. Nobody thanked me for my work. Nobody even noticed it was my last day, which honestly felt fitting. As the automatic doors opened, cold morning air hit my face, and I experienced something close to spiritual relief. Freedom. No more overnight shifts, no more Rick, no more fake teamwork in a toxic building full of bitter people pretending music solved deeper problems. I got into my car smiling. Then, just before pulling away, I glanced back at the store one last time. Huge fluorescent lights, silent aisles, exhausted workers. Misery restored perfectly to factory settings. And somewhere inside that building sat a lonely Bluetooth speaker nobody dared touch anymore because of one imaginary sleep-deprived neighbor who never existed. I drove away laughing so hard I nearly missed the traffic light. To this day, whenever I walk through grocery stores late at night and hear music playing over Bluetooth speakers, I think about Tyler putting on his fake angry homeowner voice at 1 a.m. "Hello," he'd said dramatically. "I live across the street and your bass is shaking my windows." Petty? Absolutely. Worth it? Every silent second.